All right, with the draft right around the corner, we're getting serious signs that the Eagles will draft a wide receiver early. But how early is too early for this top 30 visit? Plus, the reason why Jeremiah Trotter Jr. is back in play for the Birds. While there's also some intriguing sleepers linked to Philly, so let's talk about that as well as the unfortunate possibility of Howie Roseman losing picks in the draft, and the really good news on the Eagles' latest addition to the defense. But first, let's run it. What's up, guys? I hope you're all doing really well, and apologies because I've been under the weather, so a little bit later getting this one out. But do me a favor and hit that like button because I've got an awesome giveaway that we're doing on draft night that you don't want to miss, which is I'm going to give away that sign on draft night to one random person during the live stream. So if you want it, here's how it works. After hitting that like button, then go ahead and drop down to the comments and give me a Go Birds, where one lucky individual will randomly be selected night one of the NFL draft. So good luck and go Birds. Now, speaking of draft night, the one question we're all asking is what are the Eagles and Howie Roseman going to do, especially in the first round? Which to some, like Sports Illustrated's Albert Breer, that answer is obvious, as he said the most consistently assigned position is offensive line. And even though that may be strange given the defensive needs, Howie always prioritizes the trenches, so finding Lane Johnson's replacement makes a lot of sense. And NFL Network's Daniel Jeremiah somewhat agrees, especially given the depth of the class, citing guys like Oregon State's Talise Fuaga, Alabama's tackle J.C. Latham, Georgia's Amarius Mims, and Oklahoma's Tyler Guyton as all guys worthy of being selected at 22. Yet realistically, and even DJ admitted this, at least probably two of those guys are going to be gone by then. Plus, Jeremiah is buying into that cornerback hype that if Alabama's Terrion Arnold or Toledo's Quinyon Mitchell are still available at 16, it'd be a very obvious move for Howie to trade up and get his corner. Obviously, I think the majority of us want that at this point, especially by the fact that we've talked about it a number of times. However, there's another position that's continuing to build momentum.
The one that's that's a little bit sneaky is that I do think they need one more receiver, which sounds like almost gluttonous, but I do think you'll see them add a receiver here, in the relatively early portion of this draft to give them that third guy.
I mean, y'all know I'm a believer in that move. Heck, my latest mock draft had the Birds taking Ricky Pearsall, but the fact that Howie's continued to talk about positional value, allocation of resources, and, Kellen Moore utilizing wide receiver 3 a ton more than Philly offenses in the past, it wouldn't make it as shocking to see this type of move. But honestly though, who would be your favorite receiver for the Eagles to draft and when? Personally, like I mentioned, Ricky Pearsall would be my favorite option, however, I'd be down with quite a few different options. Like South Carolina's Xavier Legette, for example, since according to Justin Mello of the Draft Network, he popped up as a late top 30 visit for the Eagles while meeting with over 13 teams. Again, this dude just burst onto the scene recently with really only having one noticeable season of production. Yet his athleticism and potential at 6'3", 227 pounds and showing that he can consistently beat man coverage is without question undeniable. Also, like I talked about in the past, this is a guy who played over a third of his snaps in the slot, so he's comfortable being moved and put in different spots to create mismatches. Plus, who wouldn't love to have Legette's accent in Philly?
Man, I'll be right down the road. It'll be a little easier for my family to come watch me play, so that'll be great. That's just them telling me that they want me on their team, man. A lot of coaches came and hollered at me before and after this process here, man. A lot of them, man, they say they got a buzz in their facility for me, man, and I'm just ready to see where I'm going.
Seriously, though, this has to tell you all you need to know about Howie's interest in receiver because, honestly, if we're looking at this, there's no way Xavier Legette goes outside of the second round. Oh, by the way, Jeremiah is also very confident the Birds take a running back in day 3, even betting a reporter lunch if that didn't happen. Now, DJ's prediction for who that would be is Memphis's Blake Watson. Because, if you have a guy in Kenny Gainwell who's only got 1 year left on his contract, then why not replace one Memphis back with another one? Of course, if you're not familiar with Watson, he's a 5'9", 200-pound running back who ran a 4.4 while also posting a 42-inch vertical. And considering his ability to be productive in both the ground game and passing game, DJ called him a good flyer to take. And sure, this dude definitely has several areas to like about his game, but if you're looking at a couple other visits the Eagles have brought in, and you want to take a runner earlier, then USC's Marshawn Lloyd is definitely worth a look, since he's a little bit heavier while continuing to receive those Jerick McKinnon comps. Plus, judging by his interactions in Philly, it seems like the feeling's mutual.
Growing up an Eagles fan and then finally meeting him, he was super cool. I was not he was so chill. He wasn't, he just was a regular guy. And that was pretty cool just to see him up close and talk to him.
He was a regular guy. Super Bowl winning GMs, they're just like us. Who knew? So when you go in there, is it like Sirianni's in there too? Because he's not a regular guy. He's wild.
Yeah, no, he is. He definitely is. He was a laid back, chill
Really?
guy as well.
Cool.
Yeah, really laid back. He had his feet on the table. He was just talking to me, asking me about my career, and just asking me about my life, honestly. And it was just good to have a one-on-one and talk to him, up close and personal. But I think they're both really two good guys.
Again, just a reminder, but this dude would probably be somewhere around the 3rd or 4th round if you wanted to take him. Honestly, though, I'm just super excited about the prospect of getting a corner so early, because it hasn't happened in over 20 years, and with Vegas now listing cornerback as the favorite pick for the Eagles, I think that's definitely saying something considering Howie himself has never personally picked a corner in the first. But I get it, it's understandable to say you gotta win in the trenches, so get someone early, except a later top 30 visit with Notre Dame's Blake Fisher, according to Matt Freeman, could suggest the Birds have that as another option to still grab a tackle later in the draft, with the Fighting Irish's 2-year starter at right tackle having what scouts call the power to play at the NFL level, but needing to get quicker with his foot speed. However, at 6'6", 312 pounds and only 21 years old, the feeling is that he's got more than enough time to develop and iron out some of his weaknesses, especially considering the general consensus is that NFL-level speed rushers would likely give him problems. Yet again, if you're taking him as Lane's replacement, then I'm trusting Stout can get him ready at the next level. And as Anthony DiBona pointed out, the fact that his anticipation of the snap count is one of his bigger weaknesses plays right into Lane Johnson's strengths, so could be a perfect fit. Of course, the only way this works is if you trade back out of the 2nd round and get a 3rd round pick with, I don't know, maybe Seattle perhaps? But I think this just goes to show that Howie is leaving no stone unturned and giving himself all kinds of outs on draft night. Oh yeah, while also getting a good bit of help from several Eagles.
Yeah, I think it's just it's like I opened this door and now all of a sudden, everyone wants to scout. But you know what? I love that our players are interested in the evaluation process.
All right, well, that help is good. What isn't is illegal tampering during free agency, which, just to jog your memory, apparently happened after Saquon Barkley was signed, and then Penn State's James Franklin either used the wrong choice of words or just said something he wasn't supposed to.
To come back and be able to play within the state, in Philadelphia, he said that was one of the first things that Howie said to him on the phone as part of kind of his sales pitch to him. Was not only the Philadelphia Eagles and that, but obviously the connection with Penn State and the fan bases as well.
Okay, you're right. Barkley did shoot down the notion of tampering, saying Franklin misconstrued what actually happened. Yet either way, the NFL is now investigating. As Adam Schefter reported, sources believe the discipline, which is likely to involve draft picks, is expected to be more severe for the Atlanta Falcons. And sure, Kirk Cousins' situation is definitely worse because he just came right out and admitted it the day before that type of communication was legal. Obviously, the hope is that the punishment doesn't involve picks. Yet I'm with Anthony, who said the fact that discipline is expected to be more severe for the Falcons likely means that there is some type of discipline involving the Eagles as well. Where are y'all at, though? Do you think this ends up involving picks, or is this just more of a compensation type of thing? I mean, this isn't Howie's first rodeo, and he knows the rules, but perhaps the lack of sleep during free agency made him a little careless. Which, speaking of sleep, this is a great time to mention the sponsor of today's video, Bear Mattress. Because while Howie may not have the luxury of getting sleep this time of year, hopefully you are getting good sleep. Plus, April's a great time for spring cleaning, which is what I've been doing a lot of, and I'm sure many of y'all have been doing the same. So how about taking a page out of Howie Roseman's book and upgrading in more than just a few areas? Because Bear Mattresses are Green Guard Gold certified and Certi Pure US certified, meaning they're free of any polyurethane-based foams and harsh, unnecessary chemicals and pollutants. They're also running a lot of great spring sales now, but Bear Mattress gave me a special Philly Special discount just for you guys. So head to bearmattress.com/Philly Special and use my code Philly Special to get 40% off your Bear Mattress. I mean, we've had ours for about 3 months, and we love it so much that we're even looking into the Bear Cub option for our 2-year-old. But fine, if you want a little bit of proof on it, the analytics back it up as well. Since judging by my sleep numbers the last couple months, not only has the quantity improved, but also the quality has. The reason is Bear knows everybody's different on preferences and sleep positions, which is why they've made a sleep quiz that removes all the guesswork. I'm more of a side sleeper who likes a softer mattress, while my wife sleeps on her back and prefers a medium firmness. And after taking that quiz, Bear matched us up with their elite hybrid mattress, so we both got what we wanted. And then Bear delivered the mattress right to our door, where we were able to easily unroll and set up our new one, which the girls may or may not have helped break in. By the way, the other issue, if you're like me, is that I always seem to sleep too hot, but after switching to Bear Mattress, I haven't had that problem, because Bear's sleep recovery technology uses a Celliant-powered fabric to help you stay as cool as the other side of the pillow. Trust me, there are some things in life that you wish you'd taken advantage of when presented the opportunity, and this is one of those things. The best part about all this is, like I said, Bear delivers your mattress right to your door with free shipping in the US. But hey, I get it. It'd be nice if everything had a try before you buy type of deal. Fortunately, Bear does though. with their 120-night sleep trial. So you get over 3 months to make sure you love it or your money back. They also have a lifetime warranty, and they offer flexible payment plans and financing options. I love my Bear mattress, and I think you would too. So if you're looking to upgrade your sleep, head to bearmattress.com/Philly Special and use my code Philly Special to get 40% off your Bear mattress for a limited time. Again, they have a lot of spring sales going on right now, but my code is higher than what's being offered on site, so check it out while you can. Now, speaking of sleeping and sleepers, there's another cornerback that the Birds brought in for a top 30 visit, with Andrew DeCecco sharing Philly brought in Boston College's Elijah Jones earlier this month, who's a guy that Jim Nagy calls his top defensive sleeper for the 2024 NFL Draft. And I guess I could see that since he had one of the best man coverage grades and completion percentage grades in the entire class. Although on the flip side, he's just average in zone coverage, and he's already 24 years old. However, the production is certainly there with 5 interceptions last year, and he left scouts saying his length and movement skills have potential, but it's more likely that he ends up being a backup outside corner for a team that likes to play a lot of press man coverage. So while he may not be the best fit, and there's certainly some other guys to like ahead of him, it's not a surprise that the athletic corner is getting a lot of momentum before the draft. Now, while we're on the topic of corners gaining interest, I've got to bring up the fact that Isaiah Rodgers was officially reinstated by the NFL and is now an official member of the Eagles. Which, yeah, is obviously fantastic news there, because not only can he be a game changer on defense, but his speed and elusiveness presents problems on special teams. And the fact that he's on a 1-year, $1 million deal is ridiculous. But I think my favorite part was his reaction to getting reinstated. I'm back. By the way, for those wondering, it sounds like Rodgers is going to stick with the number 34 for his jersey based on his designer. Anyway, how are y'all feeling about the latest decision? Also, even though it's great, I don't think it changes the fact that Howie will invest in corner early in the draft. And there's quite a few other sleepers to keep an eye on as well. Which is why I caught up with Pro Football Network's Anthony DiBona to ask him about other prospects and the most realistic scenarios for the Eagles.
All of the, oh my gosh, the scouts believe there's 60 first round picks in this draft, and every single player is going to be the next prodigy, and all this other stuff that comes out. We know to take it with a tip or a grain of salt and everything else there. But still, I am curious, and lots of people are curious, because seeing the show and watching your comments and everything else, you do a great breakdown on tons of different players, but had to get your thoughts as far as especially sleeper picks, because I think that's a lot of times where, people that may not follow the draft as closely are curious. What are some names, who are some names that people need to keep an eye out for with this draft in particular? And maybe if you have a couple on offense, couple on defense, but some big sleepers for you in this draft.
So one of the guys that I was higher on in my original big board that I put out in February, and then he kind of performed well at the Combine, performed well in the Shrine Game. But Anthony Gold, wide receiver from Oregon State, he's kind of a smaller guy, but only 5'8", 174. But he ran a 4.39 40. He had an 80-yard touchdown punt return in the Shrine Game, so that kind of helped put him on the map. But it's just what I saw besides his speed, that's pretty obvious given his size. I feel like you kind of would expect that, but the toughness that he plays with, and he kind of played a lot on the outside, which you don't really see for a guy that size, which kind of reminded me of Tank Dell. I'm not saying he's the same player, but everybody's going to be kind of looking for that guy. So I feel like on day 3 or late day 3, whatever the case might be, I feel like if you're looking for the next Tank Dell, it's kind of worth taking a chance on Gold, because I feel like he has that ability. He's going to probably be more of a slot guy in the league because of his size, but the speed that he has, the toughness that he has, the run after the catch ability that he has, and obviously the punt return ability. And he's returned kickoffs as well. So with the new rule there, he can kind of earn an extra role there. So I feel like he would add a ton of value on day 3. And for the Eagles in particular, given the departure of Quez Watkins, that some people might be happy about, some people might be sad about, but I feel like they'll be looking for that speed element, and I feel like he's kind of a good flyer to take on day 3.
Okay, awesome. There's one offensive player. On the flip side, you got a defensive guy in mind as far as a sleeper there?
Yeah, I got one more on offense too, but I'll jump to defense. And this is kind of like you were alluding to, where guys kind of like, we get to this point in the offseason where people are, it's like paralysis by analysis, where you're just over analyzing guys, where we're like, oh, he was a day 2 pick, and now all of a sudden he's like a 7th rounder. And people are just like, they haven't played a snap of football in the last 4 or 5 months, but now all of a sudden, because they ran this time, or they saw this, or they saw an analysis to say this, it's just like, it drives me crazy sometimes. And I can't believe I'm saying this name, but Jeremiah Trotter Jr. from Clemson. I mean, he was a popular name with a lot of people, a lot of Eagles fans, for obvious reasons, because of his father. I remember putting out mock drafts in February where people were like, why is he not the pick at 50? Why is he not the pick at 53? This mock draft sucks. And now all of a sudden it's like people want nothing to do with him. They don't even want him with like the 120th pick. They're just like, oh, he's too small. He's too slow. But I mean, I've seen him draw comparisons to Nick Bolton from the Chiefs. And I feel like when you look side by side, very similar concerns coming out. Nick Bolton went into the 2nd round for the Chiefs. now 3 years into the league, he has 350 plus tackles, and he's kind of been a key player for the Chiefs. And if you look at the numbers side by side, I mean, people say Trotter's too small. He's 6 foot, 228, 31.5-inch arms, but Nick Bolton was 5'11 and an eighth, 237 pounds. So he was a little bit of a thicker build and 31 and 7/8-inch arms. And then if you look at his times, Trotter only did 2 drills. He did the 3-cone and the short shuttle, 7.13 seconds in the 3-cone, 4.4 seconds in the short shuttle. And then Bolton had 7.4 seconds in the 3-cone and 4.5 seconds in the short shuttle. So he's kind of right there, right in that same category. And I feel like the production on the field kind of speaks for itself. But we're getting to that point where I guess Eagles fans in particular, they see Nakobe Dean and they see a smaller linebacker and they're like, oh, he's going to get hurt. He's going to struggle, which are fair. I understand that. But it's just like, and now if he's there at like 120, I feel like, or if the Eagles trade back from the second round into the third round, I feel like, why wouldn't you take a chance on him? I feel like the tape speaks for itself. The name speaks for itself. Howie Roseman himself has said he kind of puts a little bit more emphasis on guys that understand what it's like to play in Philadelphia. So obviously he has ties to the area because of his dad. So I feel like he's a no-brainer. I feel like at this point he's kind of underrated because he's been so overanalyzed at this point in the offseason.
Yeah, it's funny to hear you say that, quite honestly, but you're right, because of the duration between when we start getting hypes on these players and then the combine hits and then all the other reports that come out and then potential prospects, that he has kind of fallen to a certain point. And it's weird on one sense of saying there's a potential sleeper there, but I totally get your valid explanation there of the reasonings behind it, because the size and Nakobe Dean and all that you said there. But yeah, I think most every NFL fan, certainly Eagles fan, would take a look or know Nick Bolton and say, all right, yeah, like, you sign me up for that. If we could have a Nick Bolton in that sense, then absolutely we're going to draft it. So it'll be interesting. And again, to your point, we know that Howie does like those types of players. You mentioned 2 other sleepers that you have in mind there. What are those for the moment?
So everybody's kind of looking for the next right guard for the Eagles. So Mason McCormick from South Dakota State is a guy that the Eagles actually sent assistant offensive line coach TJ Pagnetti to the pro day. I mean, they also have Garrett Greenfield, who's an offensive tackle prospect. Both players have a ton of upside. They're older prospects because they played 5 or 6 years. McCormick, and he's going to be a 24-year-old rookie, which is kind of scary. He's kind of like the Brandon Whedon of offensive linemen. But when you look at his athleticism, he's literally tested the 7th best guard in history out of 1,500 plus guys that have been categorized by the relative athletic score. So, I mean, obviously Jeff Stoutland loves his athletic offensive linemen. So I feel like McCormick's kind of risen up draft boards. I feel like you kind of see him now in like that 3rd round, 4th round range. But if he falls to 120 and the Eagles haven't taken an offensive lineman up until that point, I feel like he would be a perfect fit because he can kind of he worked out at center a little bit too, so he can kind of be that guard center. I feel like he could probably start right away at right guard if they're not confident in Tyler Steen or if he just competes with Steen. So that'll be interesting. And then on the defensive side of the ball, a guy that I've kind of tweeted about a lot is Sione Vaki, a safety / running back / everything at Utah, because the guy is just, what he did was kind of crazy because all of their running backs got hurt. And he was a starting safety alongside Cole Bishops, who's another guy that's going to be highly rated out of Utah. But Vaki, he just, in one game against USC, he had like a couple tackles on defense, but then he also had like 14 touches for 2 touchdowns and over 200 yards from scrimmage. So, I mean, you don't know, people are like, oh, he's definitely just going to be a safety at the next level, but it's just like that kind of willingness for probably a late day 3 pick. I feel like that attitude, that willingness to play probably special teams, offense, defense, if you need, whatever the case might be, I feel like he's just a player that's worth taking a chance on because you just kind of get him on your roster, and that with that personality, he's going to win a roster spot and do whatever you need.
You say it there too. I mean, again, like a weapon, someone who can be used all over the field. Love those types of playmakers. And like you also mentioned, a late day 3 pick or a day 3 pick in that sense is always lots of value there, because if you say someone makes the roster on special teams, they can make a significant impact. We've seen a number of guys make a career out of being solid special teamers. So I'm on board with it, you know, the possibility of a weapon. Now, speaking of having a weapon, naturally, I think the 1st round pick is obviously on everyone's mind. And what are the Eagles going to do with that standpoint? We've heard Daniel Jeremiah reference recently saying that it's very likely he could see the Eagles trading up for a Terrion Arnold or Quinyon Mitchell. Adam Schefter left it more of a broad statement, not specifically for players, but still hey, Howie Roseman trading up is a definite possibility. I think people are starting to come to terms with that, but corner continues to be the favorite. It feels like it's the position that has, I guess it had momentum earlier, but the longer that this has gone on, the more that it's gotten more and more momentum. The odds, if you look at the betting odds or the lines there of what pick will the Eagles go with, the corner has slowly gotten up to the favorite option for the Eagles. Where are you at on that? And also, if it is a corner, who do you feel like is the most likely that Howie would get, whether that's a trade up or just who's going to be available there at corner for the Eagles?
I mean, I feel like for months we've both been talking about Quinyon Mitchell. So I feel like he's an obvious target. But I mean, over the process, and I feel like we can't do much from the outside, but you can pick up things on guys' personalities and interviews and stuff like that. And just when I watch Terrion Arnold, he just screams Eagles pick to me because it's just like he's got his head on straight. He says all the right things. I mean, at the combine, on his episode of Up and Adams when he was asked and he mentioned Brian Dawkins kind of out of nowhere. I mean, that kind of stuck out to me because I know he visited Philadelphia around that time, I believe, but there's not a lot of people that just mention Brian Dawkins. I know people in Philadelphia and Eagles fans love him, but he's not the first name that comes to people's mind when they think safety. Usually a lot of guys will say, and as a person, which I feel like, once again, it's hard to evaluate from the outside, but just hearing what he says and how people talk about the person that he is and how he's talked about his upbringing and how much football means to him. I feel like if the Eagles can trade up and if Mitchell is the first guy to go off the board, I feel like Arnold's a couple years younger. I mean, he has a little bit more value in terms of that long term, but I just think he'd be a perfect fit and the perfect target to trade up. I've seen people say like Vegas or somebody like that or Denver in a trade up if the Eagles throw like one of their second round picks and 22. But I mean, it's just either one of those guys would be home run picks for me. And I feel like they bring the necessary value as like defensive cornerstones moving forward for the Eagles.
I'll be excited. You know I will be. We've talked about it on every single episode I think we recorded, but I will be ecstatic if we get a cornerback. To what you mentioned earlier, again, I'm slightly Quinyon Mitchell ahead of Terrion Arnold, but I won't be upset for the record because some people have mentioned that being like, oh, you're going to hate. No, I don't hate Terrion Arnold. If Terrion Arnold is drafted by the Eagles, I will be very happy about that. But it's Quinyon Mitchell slightly over. Really quickly too, I'm just curious. I've gotten this question a couple times, and it's a totally fair point, certainly from looking at the Howie Roseman aspect of it, but you know, the switch of drafting Power 5 type of players, guys who have played against competition, that's a knock naturally on Quinyon Mitchell of, hey, he played at Toledo. So, you know, the question's also, name me a Toledo really strong player, really, really good player. There's a few out there. Kareem Hunt was the first one that came to mind, but there's not near as many, obviously, as like an Alabama. Is that a too big of a knock for you to say Quinyon Mitchell? I know that you're really high on it. We both are. But what do you say to people that might go the whole idea of, hey, he hasn't played against as great of competition as, you know, Terrion Arnold on average?
Well, I feel like if he didn't play at the Senior Bowl and kind of like hold his own against all those top guys that were there, where he was, I mean, he got beat a couple of times, but every cornerback does, especially in those one-on-one drills. It's basically an offensive-based drill. So, I mean, you could take that for what it is, but he's just, on the tape, he's an unbelievable player. He has the right attitude. The only reason I honestly put Arnold over him is because of age. And I feel like that's a factor when you're thinking about long-term building a team. It's not like he's a 27-year-old rookie, but it's just, I think he's around 22, 23. So I think he's maybe a year or two older than Arnold. But I just feel like obviously that the Eagles have been focusing on those SEC guys lately with all the Georgia players that they took. So that could be a factor for them. And I feel like early on, yeah, exactly. I mean, like early on, they might value that more. It's just like, oh, the level of competition. But given how he showcased his skills at the Senior Bowl, that kind of, I think it should have put to bed any issues about what the competition that he played against, because he did a good job in that situation.
I got to give you some credit too, because it's been a while, longer than what we anticipated or were planning on to record. But this is the first time since that moment. You hit the nail on the head as far as Smitty contract numbers, the expectations there. You had predicted it before it happened. So, again, kudos to you. And if you're not already, make sure to follow Anthony DiBona, Pro Football Network on Twitter. It's at DiBona PFN. But thoughts on the Smitty contract, again, and if you want to go ahead and, just take the roses there because you called it, that's perfectly fine. But also the impact for the team here, Kellen Moore, the offense that he can be able to design with Smitty. We've mentioned it a couple times, but given the contract scenario again, I saw some people start speculating of, oh my gosh, those numbers. And it's more so I feel like on the maybe Cowboys fans, there's some trolls that hopped on during videos and stuff like that I got. But there were some Eagles fans that going like, oh my gosh, that's a ton of money there. But why is this deserving for Smitty? And also, why can we expect to potentially see a bigger role or a different role for Smitty in Kellen Moore's offense?
Well, firstly, I'm just glad it wasn't another Saquon Barkley situation for me, where I kind of put a statement out there and then it blew up in my face. But yeah, I was a little off with the guarantees because I personally thought it was going to be like a 5-year extension, but they kind of just used that 5th year option and just threw 3 years on top of it, which worked out better because the thing is, people always react to these initial contracts and the initial numbers that come out. They're like, oh my God, that's so much money. But then when you look at the actual structure and the way it breaks down, it's an absolute steal because they're never paying him more than like I think they're paying him more than $20 million only in the final year of his deal, and by that point, he's going to probably be extended again. So I mean, that number is going to be lowered, and the cap's going to be higher. So, I mean, it was just so important for once again Howie Roseman to kind of get ahead of the market, pay his receiver beforehand, and I think in Kellen Moore's offense, you've kind of seen him, especially with the Cowboys, when he was having Michael Gallup put up 1,000-yard seasons. I just can't wait to see what he's going to do with DeVonta Smith and A.J. Brown, because he's done. And before Mike Williams got hurt last season, him and Keenan Allen were putting up some crazy numbers too in those first 2 or 3 games. So just the possibilities are endless with this talent. And I feel like Kellen Moore is going to put them in a better situation to succeed, where he might get over 100 receptions in a season. He might break 1,400 receiving yards. So, I mean, he's kind of been held back a little bit because he wasn't really utilized the best. But now I feel like we're going to see him and A.J. Brown both move around a lot more, probably both get a lot more snaps inside the slot and kind of present different looks to the defense. And it's just going to be exciting to watch next season.
And also, let's not forget, I mean, DeVonta Smith, apparently, if you believe this, has added 20 pounds. According to Ocho Cinco. I don't know if, I don't know if he's legit 190, but Ocho Cinco on the podcast with Shannon Sharp had said he's 190, believe me. I mean, I will say, I think that you can attest to this. All the dads out there can attest that dad strength is something, so he's already got that. And then if he's legit 190, I mean, look out. Like, if Smitty is 190 in Kellen Moore's offense, it'll be crazy. But, I mean, come on, realistically, are we buying the 190 for Smitty?
I mean, speaking from experience, I think I put on about 20 pounds with my first kid too. So we'll see what happens.
I mean, if I was also eating McDonald's diet, like Smitty apparently is, then for sure it would be without question. But
Chad Johnson's the originator of the McDonald's fast food diet, and he loves all that stuff. He always talks about how that extended his career. So who knows? Maybe it did. Imagine DeVonta Smith comes back and he's just jacked and just looks. He's got Saquon Barkley's legs.
Yeah, he's just yoked, and all of a sudden you're like, is that DK Metcalf and AJ Brown, or is that AJ Brown? Who is that out there? Oh,
that would be hilarious.
But honestly,
we'll see.
I mean, even like 5 or 10 pounds, because I know that's always been the comment. But he's been, to his credit, I mean, he's been healthy. He stayed healthy. His ability to not get injured. I mean, just the toughness and everything else out there too. So I'd be for it. Yeah, if he's put on even 5 to 10 extra pounds, that'd be great. But I'm very excited to see the impact that he has in the offense. Also with Jalen Hurts, talking about Kellen Moore and the changes. I thought he was very honest in his press conference of saying, he's excited, but also he's got a lot to learn, which is understandable. New offensive coordinator, quarterbacks coach Doug Nussmeier, and picking up the system there. But within, what Kellen Moore asks for his quarterbacks, or asks from his quarterbacks, is different than, a lot of offensive coordinators. But I think it could be a good growth point for Jalen Hurts. But how are you feeling about what could be better, and where's maybe the biggest area of improvement or growth that you might see from Jalen Hurts this upcoming year?
Well, one, it was kind of cool to see Jalen Hurts admit that, where he was like, hey, I'm not really happy about this constant change. And because I feel like he's kind of people kind of get bored with his answers. He kind of gives those just sugar coated, whatever, just boring answers. But he was honest. He was like, hey, this is not ideal. Of course, I yearn for the consistency and having multiple people, the same coaches in place year over year. And I think Shane Steichen was probably the only guy that he had back-to-back seasons, I believe, dating back to college. So it's pretty crazy that he's had to go through this. Hopefully Kellen Moore's around in Philadelphia for more than 1 year. That's kind of everybody's concern, that if their offense does turn it around, then he's just going to be poached, which, I mean, it would be a good problem to have given what the struggles they had last year. But I mean, what I would like to see more with Kellen Moore and Jalen Hurts in particular is just using him more under center, because we just never saw that when he was with Brian Johnson. So it was all just shotgun base. You never really saw him under center. And I feel like that would open up so much more in terms of just a power running game, just different looks, bootlegs, and getting Jalen Hurts on the move and putting the wide receivers in different spots. And I feel like Jalen Hurts is just he kind of took a huge step back last year with the turnovers, but he's a much better player than I think we saw last season. And I'm just hoping that Kellen Moore, and he seems willing to, and able to kind of take the coaching and move on. So we'll see what happens.
I'm excited. I really am. I've been asked a number of different times, but expectations for Jalen is I don't think it's crazy to say or just ridiculous. Sure, there might be some growing pains early in the season, trying to make adjustments, get things figured out, but the comfortability, once you get to middle of the season, certainly towards the later part, it should be, hey, this is what we've been doing for several months at this point. There's nothing really new or crazy. And that's where I'm going to really look at, okay, has Jalen taken that next step? And also, whereas, when we played the Niners, it was like that was the for sure blueprint that teams started taking it. Well, that's what you do to shut down the Eagles. It'll be different because the nuances are not the same, and it's not 91% or whatever it was from shotgun, So hopefully we are, to your point, from under the gun, play action. But there's also tons of weapons, like we're mentioning too. I mean, you got a Saquon Barkley back there. Maybe we're going to get a wide receiver 3 in the draft. Or just, insert anybody for Quez Watkins. There it is. Yeah, I can't help but take a shot at Quez every single one of these podcasts we're going to do.
And a better second tight end, too. a better second tight end helps, too.
Yes, a better second tight end, So we'll get some other options out there. But are there any weaknesses in your mind on this offense? Any weaknesses as of today, before the draft, that you see on this offense?
I mean, honestly, like you mentioned wide receiver 3, which is really like, if that's one of your biggest concerns, that's a good problem to have. But I feel like the right guard spot, which is obviously a question mark, I wouldn't even say it's not necessarily a concern because, I mean, before last season, I was one of the bigger proponents of like, I think Tyler Steen should just start right away because you kind of knew that Kelce was going to play one more season and Cam Jurgens was going to slide over. So my reasoning was like, if Steen's going to eventually be your right guard, why not just let him start? And then this way Jurgens isn't playing out of position and then he can kind of spend full time learning center. But I mean, he got some experience. He looked decent at right guard before kind of declining a little bit during the end of the season. So Tyler Steen showed promise, but I feel like they definitely need to bring in some other competition there because I don't think you just feel comfortable just handing the job to him. So, I mean, Hennessy might compete with him, but I feel like they need to bring a bigger person, a bigger name in. If it's somebody that's going to play maybe Lane Johnson's replacement eventually and they're competing for right guard now, but I mean, whatever the case is, I just feel like they need to have some sort of competition at that spot. But besides there, I mean, you're just talking about depth because, I mean, CJ Uzomah is a better upgrade over Jack Stoll last year. So second tight end's not as much of an issue. So, I mean, you could kind of bring somebody else in there, but I feel like they're pretty much set everywhere except at that right guard spot. And wide receiver 3, which, like I said, is just that's kind of a luxury in today's NFL.
Yes, it truly is, and I got a lot of flack for drafting Ricky Pearsall on my latest mock draft because it's 50-50. It's very polarizing, as a lot of picks are, because you take him as, oh my gosh, I love that, or no, we don't have the luxury to afford that because we got to draft defense and other positions and everything else. So hey, everybody's got their own opinion. That's great, totally respect that. I'm of the same thinking on yours of like, I'm hopeful Tyler Steen does well. I'm hopeful that sure maybe that does work out and he is the right guard, but I've gone back and forth on it because if he was the guy, I think you made the point maybe last week or whenever we've talked previously, but it's like you felt like you might have gotten some more snaps or he might have been able to go out there more if there was the belief. Now, there certainly is, as of today, they're giving him the first crack at it because he slid into that right guard locker position next to Cam Jurgens, and Cam Jurgens talked about the potential that he sees in Steen, and he's willing to help him and all that other stuff. So that's great. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see, do they draft a player, how early that might be. But also, to your point of tight end, I mean, the Eagles are at least meeting with some of the guys via Zoom, that is. But I mean, Jatavian Sanders from Texas, Jaheim Bell from Florida State. Those are playmaking tight ends, guys who can possibly do something with the ball in their hands. And if you got some other options, if Dallas Goedert hopefully does not get injured, but we've seen it in the past, so just planning on things like that. But also, even running back, if we want to throw that out there. I mean, just some potential playmakers in Audric Estime, Marshawn Lloyd from USC. So there's a lot of other options in this draft, but I'm curious specifically with tight end and running back, out of those potential names and even the other guys, that have been linked to the Birds, how early would it feel like, I guess, is justified to go for a tight end or even running back? What's the earliest that you might see in this draft for the Eagles?
I feel like those two positions in particular, I feel like 120 would be like the sweet spot, anywhere there and behind. I mean, unless they trade back from 50 or 53 and get like a third round pick, I feel like it would be perfectly fine there. But especially, it's funny because all those guys besides Sanders, I feel like kind of, if you look at mock drafts, they kind of fall in that 120th pick right around that area, like early fourth round. So it makes a lot of sense. I mean, Marshawn Lloyd, he said he's an Eagles fan growing up. He kind of spoke about his visit with the Eagles. So that was kind of cool to hear about that. And I kind of knocked the Commanders because they're taking guys to Top Golf, and now the Eagles are having guys kind of sit down one-on-one with their coach, their GM. So it was kind of cool to get it kind of behind the scenes look with that. But it's just like, yeah, I feel like Jaheim Bell he would kind of like kill two birds with one stone because he's basically a jumbo wide receiver. He's like 6'2", 240 and change, freak athlete. He kind of was used everywhere at Florida State in the backfield and the slot outside. So I feel like that kind of weapon in Kellen Moore's offense would be kind of fun to watch. So he's definitely a name that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I don't think the Eagles are going to kind of waste a top 30 visit on a tight end given their situation there right now and just the positional value. But talking about, I know you didn't ask me about it, but in terms of wide receiver, if they took a third wide receiver, I feel like 50 or 53 would be perfectly fine, just because the Eagles, a lot of the times they draft for positional value and like they kind of look ahead to see how those positions are getting paid. So tight end and running back, they don't get paid a ton compared to receiver or offensive lineman or cornerback. So, I mean, getting those guys in your building, even though they're already paying 2 wide receivers top tier money, having that other guy, which we've talked about in the past and I've wrote about in the past, is just that would be so important to have a guy for the next 4 years under a super team friendly contract, maybe like 4 years, 5 or 6 million, whatever those the day 2 picks get. That would be such an asset in today's game. So it'll be interesting to see what happens because there's just so many options, and I feel like I kind of want to see the Eagles trade back from 50 or 53 because I feel like that 3rd and 4th round is where a lot of the value is in this draft. So I feel like I just can't see Howie Roseman sitting there, sitting on his hands from 53 to 120 for like 70 picks or whatever it is. And just watching all those guys go by. I feel like he's going to make some sort of move.
I'm totally with you, especially to your point of the value, because and again, it's not perfect. Everyone knows this, but still, like the mock draft simulators are generally accurate with just the broad level of, hey, here's roughly the types of talent that will be available in those rounds. And so anyone who's done a couple mock drafts or hundreds of mock drafts like we've done, or however many mock drafts you've done, realize that there's a lot to be valued in that. And I saw the potential, I can't remember who suggested it first, but I've seen a number kind of jump on this theory, but like trading up to Seattle at 16, you could trade, and this is just a hypothetical as everything is this time of year, but trade 16 and 50 to Seattle, and then they trade 22 and 50 to Seattle, and they trade you 16 and 81. I mean, that's a way for Seattle to get back into the 2nd round and for the Eagles to get into the 3rd round to still keep one of their 2nd round picks. So there's also a possibility there, but I am totally with you. I can't imagine that Howie's going to go, yeah, let's take it at 53 and just sit back and wait until 120. Like that's not in his MO. So we'll see how that one turns out. But it'll be exciting nonetheless. I do got to go back real quick because you mentioned the whole Commanders top 30 visits. And I think most people have heard about this and seen it. But if they haven't, like just to catch you up to speed, the Commanders are taking their top 30 visits to a Topgolf social outing, basically, all together, which feels really weird. Because like if I want to woo a prospect and say like, oh yeah, we really want you and make you feel special, it's not to say, hey, here's all these other guys that we feel you're kind of all in the same boat with, and then hopefully you feel a difference for that organization. It's the craziest thing. Why? It doesn't make any sense to me. That's crazy.
The craziest part is that it was like, it's not like they're just drafting, say, a bunch of offensive linemen or like later picks. Yeah. It's like you're literally deciding your franchise quarterback and you're just like lumping these guys together instead of getting like a full day with them where you can kind of like a top 30 visit is like literally the most valuable like interaction you can have with a guy before the draft because they can sit down with all of your coaches, all of your front office. They can do your medical staff can work them out. Like it's a huge, huge deal. And I feel like, I don't know if it's because of their inexperienced front office or whatever, but it was just so weird to see that happen. And even Jaden Daniels, I think his agent or something like that, like tweeted out like the emoji because it was just like, why are you wasting this valuable time with these guys? Like every other team is like, especially with quarterbacks, they're like, we're going to sit down, have dinner with you the night before. Oh, yeah. Then we're going to it was just like, it's just mind blowing to me.
Yeah, save a little money, I suppose. Hey, let's just get a little Topgolf booth. Just have everybody show up and have a little.
You want mozzarella sticks? All right, here you go.
Exactly. We're gonna split that though. Everybody's gonna chip in. We're not paying for all.
My God.
One drink limit, guys. That's it. No, nothing else. Yeah, as I think all Eagles fans, we can appreciate it. It's like, hey, that's fine. If new ownership, some things never change, at least so far. So. They'll keep that up. But to your point, top 30 visits, very important. We've seen a number of those. I think linebacker also has been another position that we've kept an eye on quite a bit, understandably so, because of what we have or what we don't have. With Nakobe Dean, and this is something that continues to come up, he did have his first press conference, I guess, since the season ended, and said that he's out of the boot. He's moving very well. Had the Lisfranc injury in his left foot, I believe it was left foot. But he was saying that, he's in better shape and he's hoping to be 100% very soon. Lots of hype, everything like this, right? Like he's confident, which is fine. But also he kind of responded to a question or hypothetical question and say, hey, what do you say about the doubters or some people that are just kind of saying like, you haven't really done too much. And he's basically to the effect of saying like, we'll see, I'm here now. Like, you're going to see it. And that's great. cool, you have some confidence, but I totally understand it too, because I got a ton of comments back of saying, well, yeah, you know what, but I really need to see it at this point because we're going on to year 3 and wasn't able to stay healthy for the one season. And you know, he's Howie's guy. Howie's been very adamant about Nakobe Dean is our green dot wearer. He's our linebacker. He's the guy of the future. We believe in him, all this other stuff. Where are you at currently with Nakobe Dean? Is there still some confidence? Is there reason to be confident in Nakobe Dean? And then I guess that's the second part of that, or the follow-up would be, you know, how much should linebacker prospect be viewed in this draft, knowing the visits that we've seen?
Well, I feel like the Eagles kind of went against the grain and against their recent history with what we've seen. They've already paid a running back. They kind of invested in Devin White, who's one of the top names out there. I mean, they didn't give him a ton of money or a long-term contract, but he's a big name at the position. So, I mean, besides that, they really haven't done anything at inside linebacker. So clearly they still think relatively highly of Nakobe Dean. But I feel like you can't just brush off the season that he had with considering how many injuries he had. And there was a concern, and that's why he fell in the draft to begin with, was I think a shoulder concern or whatever it was. So you can't just kind of sweep that under the rug. You kind of have to be like, is this guy going to be like the Avonte Maddox of linebackers for us, where he's just like decent for a couple games a year and then we just never see him, or he's just like in here and then out for 4 weeks and then back and then out for 8 weeks? Like, you have to have some sort of plan for that. I mean, I haven't given up completely on him. I feel like the tape was pretty good when he was on the field. I mean, like, he's not the biggest guy, so obviously that's going to play a factor, but he has good instincts. He's decent in coverage, I feel like. But I don't know if you could say anything for certain about him for the long-term future, because I saw somebody tweet today. They were like, oh, if the Eagles if they draft like a middle line, more of a traditional middle linebacker, green dot wearer, then that means they don't have confidence in Nakobe Dean. But I feel like both of those, him and Devin White, are really only there for another year or two, and you can't really just plan your draft now for guys that might not be here in a couple of years. So I feel like you just if they want to invest in a linebacker, just take the best guy available and then go from there and figure it out, because clearly I'm not sure you can rely on Nakobe Dean moving forward.
I'm with you, honestly. I mean, I'm hopeful. Like you said, you know, there's still somewhat of belief. I want him to prove the doubters wrong. I want him to show up and you know, be the guy that we hope that he was whenever he was first drafted. But at this point, you know, there's some worrying things from what we see naturally and what you're pointing out there. So it would make a lot of sense. And again, you look at some of the visits or the guys who have come in that Philly's interested in. Edgerrin Cooper is at the top of everyone's list. PFN, I believe it's probably still accurate at this point. I think it was about a week ago that I saw that the Eagles' most favorite pick out of all PFN mock drafts is Edgerrin Cooper to the Eagles. So it's probably only gotten worse or better, however you want to say that, because we're getting close to the draft and Edgerrin Cooper is the hype for Philly.
Well, I think like me and you have probably accounted for like 50% of that. Ourselves,
yeah, every single one. I can't quit Edgerrin Cooper. I'm addicted. Hello, it's me, Josh Davis. I'm addicted to drafting Edgerrin Cooper. And if it happens, I'm going to be thrilled, as a lot of people will. But, you know, there's still also Trevin Wallace. Cedric Gray was a reported, I guess, and then canceled visit, North Carolina linebacker. But again, to your point, you know, there's other options that have been out there, and Philly has at least shown some interest in this draft. So it'll be curious to see how quickly or how soon they might draft someone in that option. I guess realistically, and trying to take your heart out of this, because we have both selected Edgerrin Cooper a million times. Who do you think is the most realistic, just logically here now, the most realistic linebacker for the Eagles and Howie Roseman specifically to take in this draft?
I mean, I don't want to just be redundant, but Edgerrin Cooper, because
okay,
I mean,
yes.
It seems like
sure.
I tweeted about it too, where like I feel like people kind of overrate, because like what happened with Jack Campbell last year, but you really don't see traditional inside linebackers just go that early. They really usually aren't picked in the first round. You have to go back to like when Patrick Queen was picked. I think it was like the end of the first round, where that was the last draft where you kind of saw a bunch of inside linebackers go. But besides that, they usually aren't picked until like, I think on average it was like the 56th or the 57th pick, which would be obviously behind both of the Eagles picks this year in the second round. So, I mean, I think there's a chance that he could be there. And I feel like given I know there's concerns about his coverage ability, but just when he's going forward and the fact that they already invested in Devin White, who's a phenomenal blitzer, I feel like Edgerrin Cooper can kind of be your long-term Devin White, where he can kind of go sideline to sideline, get you 5-6 plus sacks a season, and kind of be a long-term foundational player at linebacker. And like you mentioned with their other interactions with the top linebackers, I mean, besides Junior Colson, who's kind of become like the new consensus number one linebacker, but that's because he's kind of like the cleanest prospect. He's better in coverage than Cooper. And then but besides him and Peyton Wilson, who's another guy that I really like, but there's concerns about his injury history and his age. Mm-hmm. The Eagles have kind of had some sort of notable interaction with all of the other guys. So, I mean, clearly they're interested in these inside linebackers, and they're going to be in perfect position to take one of them.
I'm so much hoping. I'm glad to hear you say that because again trying to get you to remove your heart from it. Logically speaking, there it is. Just a semi prediction of an Edgerrin Cooper for the Eagles. That's really what I want to see. Let's quickly touch on a couple other defensive prospects, though. The Eagles have kept an eye on, and this is an interesting one because you're kind of in that first round range. Now, if someone falls and hey, maybe there's not a prospect that Howie Roseman likes, maybe even a trade back opportunity, and this guy falls, but Jerzon Newton of Illinois, the Eagles were at, I guess his pro day was where I think I saw that with a scalpy in there. But taking a look at him, it's been interesting because very early mock drafts had him going very early in the first round, and then recently it feels like he's kind of sliding further back in the first round. But still, a guy that if the Eagles wanted, you'd have to assume it'd be at 22 or a trade back scenario, and still get him late first round, maybe possibly early second round in that sense. But share a little bit, just people may not be as familiar or why that might still make sense, even though we've gone interior defensive line quite a bit in recent drafts, but still, in what world does that make sense, and why would it still be a decent pick if that does happen?
Yeah, I tweeted about it recently. I was like, would the Eagles really do a draft a defensive lineman for like the third straight year in the first round? So, I mean, but if he's there, I mean, there's a chance they can consider it because, like I said, the Eagles care about that positional value, and they know how much these. You saw what Christian Wilkins got paid by the Raiders. I mean, these guys are making like quarterback money at this point, and it's only going to get worse because everybody wants that interior pass rushing presence. Chris Jones got a ton of money, deservedly so, but that's just what the market's becoming. And if the Eagles kind of have soured on Jordan Davis, I know he's more of a nose tackle, but I mean, if they've kind of soured on him and Milton Williams heading into the final year of his contract, a lot of people want him to get extended, which I think he should because he's probably going to have a great season and kind of get paid in free agency if they let him go. But if that's the case, then all you would really have is Jalen Carter. So, I mean, if I know 18 with the Bengals and 21 with the Dolphins is kind of like the hot spot for these defensive tackles because both of those teams kind of need somebody because the Bengals lost DJ Reader and the Dolphins obviously lost Wilkins. So, I mean, if one of those guys falls through between him and Murphy from Texas, the Eagles could consider it because, like I said, with this the value, I'm sure fans would hate it because it's just, oh my God, another defensive tackle that's going to play 30% of the snaps. It's just like a wasted pick. But just Howie Roseman likes to kind of think ahead. That's why he pays guys so early. And it wouldn't be crazy to me to see him because I think Newton is a good player. I think the Twitter clip that I shared, he lined up at like defensive end. So he kind of can line up all over the place. Yeah. He's that kind of freakish defensive tackle that everybody's kind of looking for. And so, I mean, it makes a lot of sense position value wise. I mean, the fit is going to piss people off, to be completely honest, because they just don't want that redundant position. They want to see something new. They want to see a cornerback. They want to see a linebacker. So, I mean, it's not the sexiest pick, but I think value-wise, it would make sense.
Yeah. There would definitely be a lot of fans that you get that player, understandably so. You want to take a first-round pick. You're hoping, ideally, you're like, okay, that player is going to get 60, 70% of the snaps, but in a realistic world, like you said, positional value means a lot. And if your guys are already off the board, then, hey, maybe it's a possibility. You still look at, too, and this is a guy much later in the draft, but talking about athletes and someone who does have a good bit of potential, Eagles showing interest, but Mohamed Kamara, Colorado State getting several different looks and even a private workout. I believe that Jeremiah Washburn had gone out to Colorado, I think, to get maybe Colorado or somewhere else, but specifically traveled, I guess, to give a private workout with Kamara there. This is a guy who it feels like, somewhere in that 120 range, if you're going to draft him in that sense. They're a little bit undersized, but you've made some comparisons to BG and other reasons we've talked about in the past. A little bit more, though, just kind of a recap of people that are just joining on this one. But why does Kamara potentially make some sense and an interest there, specifically a private workout of all things?
I mean, if people have been looking at my mock drafts for the Eagles on Twitter, he's kind of been like, I kind of just plugged him in at that 120th spot if he's there, because it's just like, between him and Jalix Hunt, I feel like either one of those guys. I mean, Kamara's kind of like, I think he has the higher floor because he's just like, his strength and his power is just so reliable. And that's kind of what he dominated with in college. The production speaks for itself. He had like 45 tackles for loss, 30 sacks, 5 forced fumbles. I mean, the guy was just a beast on the field. And I mean, he's a little bit smaller, so that's what people are concerned about. And they feel like he was a little bit too reliant on his power. But I mean, if he's just consistently beating people with it, why would he try anything else? So, I mean, if you kind of bring him to Philly where he can like learn for a year behind Brandon Graham, who was also kind of a shorter, stockier defensive end, I feel like it would make a lot of sense for Philadelphia. And at that point, with just the 120th overall pick, I feel like it'll be great value for a guy that could potentially start down the road, maybe in 2025 or even sooner.
I feels like you mentioned kind of slotting him there at 120. It feels like for me, I have, which it's crazy. I don't know, but it's almost like any mock draft simulator that I do. Edgerrin Cooper is slotted in. I could take him at 53. It feels like realistically I should take him at 50 or even earlier, but I've done every one because like, well, if I take him at 53, then I'll save the value and I'll just get him at 3 spots. But it's second round Edgerrin Cooper and 120 is Mohamed Kamara. So those two continue to go off the board at about the same time.
And then the last pick is Anaya Smith for me almost all the time too.
Okay,
he's like always there.
So
it's like
usually
those three are like, I try and mix it up because I do one every day basically, but it's just like, it's just become like chalk at this point.
Yes. Especially when you know the players are going to be there, then it's like, why am I wasting value on a receiver? I know a receiver I can get late. I know an edge rusher I can get late. I can get my linebacker in the second round, so I just don't even have to worry about it. But yeah, you want some changing it up there a little bit. Makes a variety is the spice of life. So, all right, I'm gonna put you on the spot. And I got a little bit of an idea because we've already talked about this a ton, and especially even in this recording. But your official, because this will be the last time we do it until the draft, your official prediction, Eagles pick in the first round, or their first pick, I guess, in general. Maybe they trade back and they don't, which I would be furious, and a lot of people would be. But who is their first pick in the NFL draft going to be? What's your prediction?
It's actually that Seattle trade up that you talked about, where it was like 16 and 81 for 22 and 50 or 53. You can swap them out however you want to do it. But I think that move in particular, for if either one of the cornerbacks fall there, either Mitchell or Arnold or Letu Latu, I feel like those three are the guys that if the Eagles are going to trade up, which is what everybody's kind of talking about, excuse me, it's kind of what the Eagles have done 4 out of the 5 drafts or whatever the case was, where everybody, and that's why it's funny because like you said, Adam Schefter and all these guys are like, oh, the Eagles are exploring trading up. It's like, yeah, of course they are, because that's what they always do. So it's like, nobody needs to report that. That's just natural. So I mean, every GM is calling around right now trying to line up trades, and then they don't want to have to work the phones last second. They kind of want to know they have this lined up, that lined up. So I mean, but that just, those 3 players make a lot of sense both on and off the field. I feel like Arnold and Latu especially are guys that kind of off the field, they just have the greatest personalities from what I can see in interviews. And I think NFL Films is following Latu, where he's training with already professional players in the off season. So I mean, he kind of has that mentality between him and Arnold. I feel like either one of those guys would be home runs. Obviously, Mitchell's in that category too. Maybe they trade up slightly for Cooper DeJean. I know you told me to pick one, but I feel like these 4 guys are kind of all in that same mix where I don't know if they'll have to trade up for Cooper DeJean, but one of those 4 guys, I know it's generic. If I have to lock in one, I'll go Terrion Arnold and a move up.
Okay. All right. We're in the same boat. I was going to say you're hedging your bets quite a bit because you're giving me 4 different options here, but that's fair. Okay, I can appreciate
It's hard. It's been a long couple months.
I hear you. Yes, I will say, because I do hope and I do want it to be a cornerback preference, I will still say I would want Quinyon Mitchell over Terrion Arnold. However, given the top 30 visits, given the interest in, like we said, Power 5 players, specifically competition, the age factor, like you mentioned as well, I would say Terrion Arnold feels more likely for Howie to go with. So that's also what I would say is Terrion Arnold would be my prediction. We'll see how it turns out. Last year, I actually predicted both Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith, just to throw that out there.
So just to lock it in, because I don't want people roasting me in the comments. Terrion Arnold in a trade up first round is my pick. Okay, I know I said a lot there, but that's my pick.
yes, because someone's gonna be like, "Wait, you said?" It's like, no, there it is. There's official Terrion Arnold in a trade up. So,
all right,
awesome. Speaking of picks, real quick before we go. We got to touch on this real quickly with the tampering situation. You know, it was several weeks ago, and then some new rumor or new news, I guess, or reports or whatever came out. Adam Schefter mentioning, NFL investigating. Still no word officially, but as they would do, not a huge surprise that there was going to be some sort of investigation in the Eagles situation with James Franklin kind of saying the wrong thing. Who knows exactly what the truth was, but it was just a very terrible way that he phrased it. Saquon Barkley came back and said, no, it wasn't me talking, it was my agent, but it sounded like that the way that Franklin said it. Whatever. Long story short, the Eagles are being investigated, as are the Atlanta Falcons. Now, the phrase used is that the discipline is likely more severe for the Atlanta Falcons. However, you could take that a bunch of different ways. What do you, just kind of the semantics on that, feel like is most likely to happen for the Eagles specifically, given what they said there about the Falcons and punishment and all that?
So, I mean, I think the Falcons are definitely screwed because Kirk Cousins literally said it himself. So, I mean, there's no really like disputing that. It's not like there's a second source like with
He could
Franklin.
come back and say, no, it was my agent, actually.
Yeah. So, I mean, that situation, they're going to probably lose a pretty relatively early pick. But I think with the Eagles, the way it was worded was what kind of caught my attention because it kind of implies that there's some sort of punishment coming for the Eagles, whether it be like a late pick or maybe just a fine. My guess is it'll probably just be a fine because I think something happened there, but I don't know how easy it'll be for them to prove it. Because, I mean, I could probably bet you that Howie Roseman probably spoke to Saquon Barkley beforehand. It's just probably what happens, but it's just a matter of hiding things and kind of covering your tracks. So, I mean, if they did it where they gave themselves up, then there's going to be a problem, and there's probably going to be a significant penalty of some sort. But my guess is we'll probably see the organization fined a couple $100,000 or something like that, and hopefully no loss of draft picks. But, I mean, if it comes down to a draft pick, I mean, if they lose like a 5th-round pick, they have a couple there anyway. It would suck, obviously, but if it was anything earlier than that, I think losing any draft pick in this year, because they only have 8. So, I mean, losing anything there would be tough. But, I mean, there's going to be some sort of penalty, I think. Hopefully not, but I think there is going to be something.
Yeah, I'm hopeful as well. We'll see what it ends up being, but yeah, the fact that, to your point, we were talking about this beforehand. If I said, hey, so-and-so's punishment is going to be more severe than yours, that doesn't mean that your punishment is nothing. That just means that you're going to be a slight less. So I agree with you on the sense of there's probably something coming. Just hopefully it's a financial slap on the wrist and not a, hey, we're going to take a draft pick from you. So we'll see. We'll remain hopeful for that. One part that we did skate by and get a little bit lucky, in my opinion, some people voice their frustrations differently, but dodging the Belichick bullet, the report of, hey, Belichick was interested in the Eagles. There was some, I wouldn't say interest necessarily, but at least some doing due diligence on Howie Roseman's side, Jeffrey Lurie's side beforehand. Whenever Nick Sirianni, is he staying? Is he going? Is Belichick coming here? All this other stuff. And then obviously the report as well of Belichick saying he would want to coach in the NFC East. Like those were his top choices, and namely with the Cowboys and the Eagles. What are your thoughts on that? I've given mine away, obviously, but where would you be at? Was it a good thing that they missed out on Belichick, or that it didn't even happen first off? But also, even after this season, worst case scenario, say something happened, good decision, or even a worthwhile decision, or is it totally no on Belichick?
Well, I mean, if you've seen the way Jeffrey Lurie works over the years, I don't think he's ever hired a retread head coach. So I feel like that kind of ruled him out immediately. I know he's talked highly of the Patriots organization and what Belichick did there, but it seems like the Eagles kind of always want to go for the up-and-coming guy instead of trying to taking a chance on a guy that's already been there, done that. Obviously, Belichick's the GOAT. He's in a kind of a category of his own, but kind of for the reason that came out in that report where they said, like, you kind of have to blow everything up for a guy that might only be here for like 2 years or 3 years. So, I mean, to me, it kind of would have been the signal that they're going all in, which is what Jerry Jones talked about famously this offseason and did nothing. So, I mean, I feel like that's kind of more of a Cowboys move than it is an Eagles move. But if the Eagles are searching for a head coach next offseason, I guarantee you Belichick's going to be involved in that process just because it's going to be hard not to kind of consider him because of his resume. But I just think it's just such a risk because unless he's bringing somebody in kind of young that can kind of take over like he did with Gerard Mayo in New England, I feel like unless you kind of have that replacement and waiting for him, it's just going to be a weird situation to kind of overhaul your whole franchise and wipe the slate clean and start over. But I mean, for now, I think it was the right decision because I like the coordinators that they put around Sirianni, but I think it's certainly something that's going to be revisited in 2025.
Yeah, I'm glad that, like you said, I'm glad with where we're at. The coordinators there, it's just a double-edged sword. Where does this thing end up? Especially with if you have a great season, are the coordinators poached? If you have a negative season and Sirianni's gone, then does Kellen Moore move up as the head coach? Where does that go? Who knows? So, but that's a problem for another day because the draft is only a couple more days away. Excitement there. We'll see if the predictions are correct, but appreciate it always, man, joining. Again, I will just say this. If you are not following Anthony DiBona at DiBona PFN on Twitter, you're missing out. The absolute best in terms of draft coverage, NFL content, keeping you up to date with all things Eagles, insights, analysis, everything else. So go do that. Give him a follow, but appreciate it always.
I appreciate it, man. Let's get ready for this draft, man.
Let's do it. All right. Appreciate it, guys. Until next time, we'll see you. Go Birds.